every day with new updates, negative updates, positive updates, very confusing time frames. But as always, being resilient as the American people are, we continue to move on, adapting our lives, doing what we're supposed to do to make it. So you have a somewhat more positive vibe, I guess, where you have people starting to talk about reopen the economy. And, we're not going to get into conversations politically about whether that's right or wrong. Obviously, the entire country has a different opinion as to what's right or wrong with that. So there's no use in discussing the righteousness of it. But the fact is, it does appear that we are going to start opening up limited here in the next couple of weeks. And, I've been talking to my group the past week and constantly reiterating the fact that it does appear to me, and it's my opinion, but it appears to me that for the next 6 to 12 months, really our lives are going to be consumed with wearing masks and gloves when we're out and about and staying 6 feet away from everyone. I really think that that's what this is going to boil down to. You cannot keep the economy shut down that amount of time, no matter what you do. Whether you think it's right or wrong, that's just as bad. I'm not saying it's right to open it or not, but I'm telling you it's bad to keep the economy closed. So one way or the other, it's going to have to open at some point. The true protection against this is whether we're going to actually maintain the social distancing. And if we're disciplined with that, this might actually work. You watch a lot of the news and the media out there, and obviously some people have trouble with understanding social distancing. Pictures of the beaches where people are still walking next to each other, and that part I will be more vigilant about as far as being annoyed by. That is really stupid to me to be sitting there staying right next to a group of people right now in this day and time. No matter what your opinion is, you have to agree that that just doesn't make sense. So I really think this is going to boil down to how confident we are with our social distancing. But we are prepared in the real estate industry to start moving on. We have become a little more confident that we can get out there and we can successfully do the job that we need to and still be protective of not only our health, but our clients' health as well. So that's going to be something that not only our group, the SWR group at Keller Williams is going to be starting to enter into, but the rest of the real estate community across the boards. We are really going to start getting used to this type of phenomenon, this type of environment. And I think that's going to consume us for, like I said, the next 6 to 12 months, definitely for the summer. It's going to be interesting times. You can pretty much count on it. When they get back to opening up restaurants, it won't be the same for quite some time. My guess is you're going to have, every other 2 or 3 booths. You're going to have seating. You probably won't have the bar areas. So it's going to be different, but it can still work. Sure, there's going to be some suffering. Sure, there's going to be some issues. People are still dying from the virus, but people still die from the flu. They still die from heart attacks. They still die from murder. And there are a lot of things that end somebody's life. So it's very hard to prioritize what shuts an economy down and what does not. So it looks like we're going to start moving on to our new not so normal norm and see how that works for all of us. From a real estate perspective, it doesn't have that. I'm not that greatly concerned about how we move forward. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Housing doesn't stop no matter what the circumstances are. People have to continue to move. People continue to relocate. People continue to have children, which means they need bigger houses. Real estate doesn't stop. It might slow a bit, but it doesn't stop. Sure, we're talking about a little bit of a slowdown for the next month or two. I mean, who wouldn't with what's happened? But nothing points to the fact that we don't continue to remain normal, if not even get busier here in the next couple months or so. So really, from our standpoint, for the general public and all real estate agents who watch our show, which are a lot of them, from our opinion, we do think we're going to move forward, and it really is not as dismal as we might have thought. Okay, I said every week that I don't want to consume the show with Corona. We talk about this so much across the boards with watching the news and all that type of stuff. So we really want to continue normalcy with our show, which focuses on educating people about the real estate process. I normally don't like discussing the same subjects back to back, but we had such a good conversation about the listing presentation last week that I wanted just to go ahead and keep continuing because it was a good flow and there's so much to talk about. So we're going to continue our listing presentation conversation from last week. as always, I'm joined with my crew. You know, I love to have them on the show. I can't do the show by myself. And quite honestly, they do a better job than I do as explaining what's going on out there sometimes. So I've got two of my really good radio show hosts, Deb McNeil, who's been a longtime agent. She is one of my senior agents out there as far as expertise goes. She's just wonderful. She serves the Dallas-Fort Worth area, primarily the Fort Worth area. But Deb, tell them a little bit about you so they get to know you a little bit.
I'm a longtime agent. It took me a long time to get to real estate, but I'm so glad I finally got here. Love what I do and love the great open spaces in the Western Feel over here on the west part of the Metroplex.
Yeah, you're so educated, and it's so good to. Your clients are very fortunate to have you. You have such a way. You've seen a lot, and real estate is one of those industries that you do need a lot of experience, or you have to have someone who helps you with a lot of experience to get through it. And you fit that bill very well. So always glad to have you. Good to see you, David Tanner. How's everything going in Cop Hill?
Hey, it's great. It's going good.
Yeah,
I'm David.
Yeah, face mask on a lot.
What?
I've seen your
yeah, I still haven't gotten used to wearing that thing yet. But
well, it's hard. It's hard for people with glasses because it's hard to live in hell out of them.
It sure does. And everywhere I go here lately, it seems like more and more people are wearing them. And
again, I try to be very sensitive to the public and views. And everybody has differing opinions, but honestly, you should have the damn mask on. It's the right thing to do right now.
Well, and I agree. I mean, and of course, you're right. We all have our opinions about this. And it's funny. I went to the grocery store last night, and of course, at Tom Thumb, they have the aisles marked, with arrows now. So it's one way.
Right.
And it amazes me, the people who still can't figure that out. And they did that for a reason, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of idiots out there,
Exactly. But the primary reason I do it because I'm doing it for my wife because she works in healthcare.
Yeah.
And she's, of course, her schedule has been flipped upside down right now.
Yeah.
So she's working all different types of hours. She's doing some telemedicine from home, and then she's working at the hospital. So I'm very cautious when I go out because she's already exposed to a lot of different people, based on her profession. And we don't need any of us to have any downtime, but especially her.
Yeah, Dina's been doing a good job protecting us. She's the one who really has been going out. I actually have been very strict on the quarantine for myself. Not because we chose me over Dina. It was just the fact that that's how it started off, and we continue to remain vigilant to it. But even per my conversation a little while ago, even I'm starting to ease up, and it's time for me to get back out. Not on a massive basis and not in front of a lot of people, but it's time to go to the store every once in a while and help her out from that standpoint. Don't get me wrong, I cook a lot, so I do help at the house.
Right.
Well, I've been amused at myself. I've stayed in a lot, except where it counts real estate wise.
Yeah.
But Tim is going with me, my husband, and he's following me around with Clorox wipes and things like that, and reminding me, don't stand so close to people. And because my nature is to hug people, to be real close to them. And
it's very hard for me on the few interactions that I've had. It's very hard not to reach my hand out to shake somebody's hand. I mean, I was taught at a very young age to do that, be very direct.
Yep.
Same here.
Make eye contact. It's very hard when I meet someone. It's very unusual. I do get concerned as to the discussion about they think the handshake might go away. I know it sounds trivial, but that's just such an awkward. I know it probably is the right thing to do. God, that's so weird if that's the way we go to. It's so unusual.
I love a good handshake, so it's cool. Hey,
that's a good point. And right just before this all started, my daughter went through that cotillion program. I'm sure y'all have heard of that.
Yeah.
Where they teach them manners and all, they teach them how to dance, how to act appropriately, in public and
like
amongst, when you're going out to dinner and things like that. Well, one of the big things that they focused on was the proper handshake.
Yeah.
And how important that was. And I thought, and we had just finished that. It was a 6-week program right before all of this started. And I'm like you, Robert, I that's one of the things my dad really stressed with my brother and I, and my sisters, to have, a really good firm handshake. and to mean it and and use it appropriately. And I would hate to see that disappear.
I hate to say it, but I do judge people sometimes by their handshake and how direct they are with me and how meaningful it is to them. To me, a firm handshake is someone who cares. They're interactive, they're engaging, and you're right. I love how you mentioned the manners. I do believe that it was a good mannerism posture to actually reach out to someone. So that's hard for me too. I'm struggling with that, and it does pain me to see that there's discussion that might become something of the past. I'm mixed on it because I know that some people would say that's how a lot of germs are passed, but I'm also like, I don't know. That's just the way the life has always been, and I don't know if we ever stop that. So
maybe we live dangerously a little bit.
Well, I think everybody is getting to where we start realizing that we do have to live a little dangerously. I mean, there has to be.
Yeah.
One of my friends posted this morning where, the alternative is worse. The isolation and fear,
I agree.
That's no way to live, and that's why the American people are resilient in the fact that they will move on and do what they need to, even if it does threaten to somewhat some of the general population. Some people will say, look, we've got to move forward. That's the fun conversation too about this. Someone made a really good point. I know we said we're going to talk about the virus, but it's hard not to because it does relate to the business. Someone was discussing the other day about how the government shutting things down, if it really is legal, and is it their right to do so? Is it their right to tell us what they think needs to happen to put a stop? Because in the end, it's their opinion as to what needs to happen. Yes, it's very high medical opinions, but it did beg the question, does the government have the right to shut a business down? What happens if a business does open? And you're seeing this in Colleyville right now too, especially.
Right.
What does happen? Does the government have the right to tell someone they don't have the right to live their life the way they want to? That's a tough one. That's a real tough one because it was the first time that I sat back. I'm not getting into government rights and what they can and cannot do. I'm talking about the general spirit of the American people and their choice as to how they live. Should it be someone's choice that if they want to go out and risk the fact of obtaining the virus, is it that choice? Some people would argue, well, yeah, but then that hurts somebody else. That person has the choice to stay quarantined as well. They can stay quarantined too.
Yeah.
So
the only people who wouldn't have a choice is whoever the guy lives with.
What's that?
The only person who wouldn't have a choice in that scenario would be who he lives with.
Yeah.
And
people have that conversation.
And like you said earlier, look at the unintended consequences of this. I mean, the longer this goes on, more and more businesses are going to close that will probably never reopen. And then not only that, I saw last night where, this is a real detriment to, people who live with abusive spouses, children who have been abused. I mean, those are all on the increase. My heart goes out to CPS workers right now because I can't imagine what they must be dealing with.
It's a thankless job. It's so awful.
Yeah.
We had a friend who unfortunately just recently passed away. I always thought the world of him, but I was just like, God, that job, it just has to be the worst job in the world. You mentioned that, but I also read something the other day that one of the things that's on the rise is the hunger issue in young children because the donations were going through the food bank, and the numbers were astounding. So this is it's almost like you can pick it and choose it how you want to have it because one way or the other, it's not a good scenario to have an economy shut down. So it's a tough, really in my lifetime has been the most difficult. I've gone through 911, SARS, swine flu, mass shootings. I've seen in my lifetime some pretty significant things. The other generations would say World War II, Korea, Vietnam, but those were each of that. That was it. In our generation, it's a lot. It's a lot of
fast
things. And some would say, well, World War II is the biggest. Some will argue the pandemic right now is probably one of the bigger alternative changes in life, and it's tough to decide what's right and wrong. It really is the one time in my life that I'm like, I'm just not so sure. I know what I want to do. Don't get me wrong. I know what I want to do, and I know how I'm going to pursue things. I do believe that this works with proper social distancing. And I will be, when I get out and about, I will be very strict with someone that gets close to me. I'm like, hey, back off. I go, I'm glad that we're out, but I go, don't get that close to me, especially if you don't have a mask. I will be that guy.
Yeah, well, experts are even saying now that we're probably safer outside than we are inside because the more you're cooped up indoors, that's where those germs breed. And
it's not only the germs. And I've said this on several podcasts. I do so many podcasts now, I can't remember which ones I'm on these days, even when it's my own. But the mental health crisis right now in this country, it was already in bad shape, and this is making it. I mean, can you imagine being a manic depressant right now in this environment? I mean, how? I read the other day that anxiety med had gone like, I forgot what the term for 8 times is. Yeah, 8 times the request in the last month. I'm like, that's just not good. I mean, that's not good for anybody. So that's
and my wife, her coworkers will call her, different hours depending on what shift they're working now, and they're feeling it. I mean, they're feeling the stress. I mean, they love what they do, but this just hit them like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And so they're feeling it. And I don't know where this is going to go in the future. I hope, more and more, because think about all the baby boomers that are going to be retiring in the next, 5-10 years.
Think about all the baby boomers that can't retire now because they're 401k.
Yes,
because the 401k
that's right. That's exactly right.
That's another struggle too. All right, love this conversation. We can continue on. We're not going to. We're going to we're going to continue on the listing presentation. So, I've noticed something over the last few weeks that I really am starting to like. I noticed that our archive views are going up. We were slowly managing like a 250 to 300 viewership every week, which is fine. That's good. It's a lot of people to watch the show, but we have been averaging closer to 500 the last month or so, and I enjoy that. I like the fact that I preach all the time. I get nothing from viewership on our show. There's nothing. People think that money no income comes in from doing the show. We do this as a service to really solidify our brand. If there's anything we get from it, it solidifies our brand. But we're offering a service to basically everybody out there for free. We're giving you our game plan. We're telling you what we do that you're not necessarily taught. So I always reiterate, this show is outstanding for new agents. This show is outstanding for veteran agents. This show is outstanding for managers and team leads to be able to send to them saying, hey, look, I know you were having trouble on this topic the other day. You should watch this episode. And for the general public as well. I think a lot of people fail on this show by not taking a topic that they're struggling with their client and sending it to them saying, hey, look, listen to this. You can understand what it is that we're doing. So I really think that the show, in an unbiased way, has a lot of value. And I do love to see that viewership going up because that does show me that more people are starting to say, hey, this does help me. I get comments throughout the week where someone will text or email saying, hey, I really liked the show. This was really helping me. I was struggling. And that means a lot to me because that is why we take the time. Y'all, it takes time to do this show. We do this show once a week. I have to prep for it. I have to go through and choose the topic. I have to look at the information. I have to go through it and say, hey, look, this is what would be meaningful. And I like the fact my guys come in and they take their time to do it. Even though it's unscripted for them, they still have to be prepared to come on the show and talk about these topics. So I like the fact that it's appreciated. And I love the fact that we're hitting that 400 to 600 viewership range because, you say what you want. It's very hard to have 400 to 500 people listen to you and want to listen to you. That means there's a lot of people that find value in the show. So for us, that's great. Mm-hmm. All right, continuing the listing presentation. We left off where we were talking about, we got to the first part of the listing presentation where we start going through the CMA. And we didn't discuss as much about what the presentation, the binder looks like itself. We didn't talk about the net sheet and how we talk about the cost structure. And we really didn't talk about some of the paperwork that we address. So we're going to talk about that for the next 30 to 40 minutes or so. We're going to talk about those things because those are important pieces of the listing presentation. So we go through, we obtain a listing. Oh, we don't obtain it. We obtain where someone wants to come talk to us. we talked about some of the prep work we do. We go out there, we start doing the presentation. So I want to go through and talk about the topics in the presentation first. So we typically go through and we do a CMA, right? We do a comparative market analysis. We're going to tell them how we're going to market this house. We have a lot of marketing tools, especially in the Keller Williams environment. We have tons of marketing tools. So we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about all the things we can do special for them. We're going to set expectations, because that's key to anything you do. Business-wise, real estate, you have to set the expectation. That's an important piece of this one. I hope we get to that part. If we don't, we're going to have it on another show. But the expectation piece, if you want, and I've become better at pointing out the tips on the show. The part of the show, we do a lot of blabbering on the show, but there are certain points you're like, that's a good one. That one I can use. And one of the key components of this show, if you're taking notes, would be the expectation. That setting of expectations is really the key to whether you're going to have a successful relationship with that client, and actually could solve problems that are going to come out in the future if you set the expectation correct. And then, of course, the net sheet is where we tell somebody not only how much their house is worth, but how much it's going to cost. And I'm going to tell you, that's the heart and soul of the listing presentation. The only two things that the seller wants is to know how much their house is worth and how much it's going to cost. I joked last week that the most simplistic listing presentation, the most thorough listing presentation in the world would be, your house is going to sell right around this amount and it's going to cost this amount. Thanks for having me. Let me know if you're interested.
The reason we can't do that, though, is because people don't necessarily want to hear those numbers. They want to hear something much higher than that.
That's it. That's right. And I've actually been on presentations where, you know how certain people they want the meat and potatoes, right?
Yep.
And before you even get a third of the way through the presentation, they're like, okay, well, give me the meat and potatoes.
So
how much?
About that.
Like you just said, Robert.
Last week, and I want to expand on that.
Yeah.
People will try to get you to say, let's just cut through this. I'm like, I can't cut through it.
Yeah.
I go, you have to hear what it is we're going to do, or this conversation is pointless. I go, I can't tell you how much it's going to cost if I don't justify what that cost is going to be.
Right.
Listen to me. So
yeah.
We try very hard, if someone's pushing us, to recorrect. We try very hard that if they start, they go, we're going to get to that. I want you to hear this out. Now, of course, if someone just demands it, at some point we have to say, look, this is where it's at, but you have to, we have to go through this to understand it. So that does come up. So for a lot of the new agents out there, that is one of the more challenging steps in this process. And I will admit, that is where real estate can be very difficult with not having the experience. You can go through all the classes you can go through everything that's shown you how to do this. No class teaches you when you're sitting in front of a seller and they go off the road and you have to react to that. That is where a veteran agent has much more experience, because they know how to curb those roads and get them back into the main side. But when you're taught to lay this process out, I've had people that have worked with me that have Post-its, colored Post-its, so on their script when they're talking, and then the seller throws them off and they don't even know where to go back. You're screwed that way, because if you go line by line,
and and I've learned this over, since I've been in real estate, from just talking to my peers and watching your training videos and whatnot. I have learned, if you go more than about 30 minutes on that listing presentation, you really start to lose them. So I've gotten to where I'll just do some bullet points. I'll walk in there with a list of bullet points, and we'll hit those highlights. And then I give them time, to ask me questions, and then anything that I think they really need, because every house is unique, right? So you can customize those presentations, but I really try to keep it under half an hour, and then we can sit and then have just more of a casual conversation, because you will lose them quick.
I think it's a good tip to try to keep it. I mean, you got to make sure you get the information in, but you shouldn't drag it out either. And some people have a really bad habit of going a lot longer than they should. Even for me, as I've become older, I've had to time myself, because anybody who knows me, I literally can talk all day on any topic: worldwide economics, finance, real estate, fun, screwing off. I can talk about it all day long. I literally could talk until tonight, 12 o'clock. all the time too. I think I would have been a great filibuster type of guy. You know? So I've had to get to where I modify and say, look, you have this time, you have to talk about this, and you're done. No matter where you're at, you pull it. So I like that.
Senator Mesh.
In my early life, I was trained to ask lots of questions. And so I can sit there and ask questions of the seller and their situation, and I can learn a lot about them. Sometimes I have trouble remembering. I really do need to teach them about why they need to pick me. Yeah. And I love David's bullet point idea because it makes it quick, a concise way to do it.
I love the marketing because we have so many unique tools, especially we have other firms watch our show. It's not just the Keller Williams world, and which I find very flattering. I'm glad that those people watch, but we do have a lot of tools, and we have to really center what tools we're going to use to help them, because those tools do get their house sold quicker. We do have things that help them get their house sold quicker, and they have to hear what those things are. So, and actually, let's talk a little more about that. So let's go into, we talked about CMA. Let's start talking about the marketing. That's the second phase of the listing presentation. So on the marketing side, Deb, what are some things we talk about? There's so many, we can't talk about all of them, but what are some center core things that we talk about when we're going to say what we are going to do for your house?
Well, I tell them a lot goes into what the product is that we're going to sell, what their house looks like. And I really help my sellers make their house look the best it can.
Right.
And then I take it one more step with great photographs. And you start thinking, well, that's not marketing. That's just, but it is. If I don't have something beautiful to put into the multiple listing service, then we're not going to get the attention we need. And so a lot of prep work goes in before we even get to what other people call marketing.
I think one of the key components, and this is another good point for people who are listening or a takeaway from the show, how you differentiate yourself compared to the next agent is a key. Every agent comes in with the same blah, 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 blah. You have to make yourself different, not only from a personal standpoint, but from a business standpoint. So when you're focusing through what you're going to do and what you're going to say, those things should come out. So that's a key component. David, what are some add-ons to Deb? She started off, she can go forever too. What are some other
Well, no, I think that's an excellent point, because that, after all, that is the product, right? I mean, we have a service to sell. They have a product to sell. So what I try to do is really focus. I mean, I'll walk property with them. I mean, we'll go on a tour and I let them show me the house. I try not to ask too many questions up front, but just let them show me the house. We go outside, we look at the property, and then we go back in and sit down and start talking about some of the things that maybe they could do prior to, to listing that, because curb appeal matters. I mean, staging matters. Now, if it's vacant, not a whole lot you can do other than, maybe put a fresh coat of paint on or a new carpet or whatever it may be, or virtually stage it.
You bring up something that's come up, and I like to talk about new phases in real estate. And this is one that's come up over the last year that I found interesting, that I think if I was more producing as I used to be in years past, even though I still do produce, not near as much as I used to. Of course, I always keep my feet wet. It's amazing how many of my past clients think I stopped doing real estate. I'm like, whoever told you that? I go, I just, don't blab it out to everybody, but I still do. But one of the things I like that I see today, there are some houses that these are decent people, but they just don't keep it the way it should be kept. There's nothing I can do to make it look nice. I've seen some of our agents leaning towards the staged virtual tour. And those things are cool. If you haven't seen that yet, it's where they take pictures of the house and then they get rid of all the crap and they put, this is what it should look like.
Yeah.
And they're very real, and it gets a very aesthetic please. Now, it's a disappointment when they go to the house and they're like, oh, that's why we did this. We wanted you to see what it looked like. And plus it gets the attention of people that are out there that the house really could look like that with a little bit of work. So I've actually liked that. That's a new phase. Well, it's not new. They've been doing it for the last couple of years, but it seems more people are using that now. I see it more often where I'm like, that's a beautiful house. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. They staged that virtually, but that's cool though.
Well, and especially with so many people going online before they even contact an agent, in most cases, they they're looking at houses on, on the internet. So it behooves us to help our clients stage these homes when it's appropriate, because people do want to see those. And I read an interesting article the other day that said that an open houses, which we're seeing fewer and fewer of, even before COVID in some cases, that open houses only sell about 3% of homes out there.
Yeah.
I mean, yet we still do it because a lot of times our clients ask for it, and they think that it really helps showcase the home.
Right.
And it does, but what they don't realize is that's not really, in most cases,
It's unfortunate. I used to be very blunt about open houses, and I would give a very pessimistic view prior to 4 years ago. When the market spiked, I did notice the open houses were much more valuable because more people were going in there and making decisions based on that open house than they ever had previously, because the houses were moving so fast. But historically, go ahead, Deb.
I was going to say, and I had a whole different view of open houses because Tim and I bought a house from an open house.
Yeah.
And then once I was in the business, every so often an open house will bring you a buyer. Sometimes we'll bring two at once, which is always good for your sellers. So I'm a big believer in open houses when we can do them.
Yeah. What's weird is David's right about the percentages. The percentages
right.
are
Yeah.
Oh, now I think those percentages, if you looked over the last 3 or 4 years, those are up, because I've noticed more people have bought houses. But historically, an open house is not a great way to sell a house. It's funny, you want to talk about the uneducated general public when it comes to real estate. I've always found it comical when a seller is insisting I need to know that you're going to do open houses all the time. If you really want it to be just ridiculous to me, you do realize that that's not going to get this house sold most likely.
Right.
The percentage that David gave is probably correct. It's closer to 3%. The reason why most of those agents are doing open houses, when we all know it, is so that they can pick up buyers. Now, I'm really sensitive about this because I'm a big academic when it comes to real estate. I've been a long time instructor, and I tell people all the time, I jump on somebody when I hear that they said they went to do an open house to pick up a client. I'm like, you should damn well know that the reason, if you want to talk about a tip on this show, especially as a real estate agent, there's only one reason you do an open house. And it is first and foremost that is to get that house sold.
Right.
You represent the brokerage. Just because you don't represent the client, you still represent the brokerage, which means you are representing that client as well. Your job is to get that house sold no matter what it takes. Now, I agree. If you've exhausted all those efforts and it's obvious they're not going to buy that house, then now put your hat on and try to pick them up as a buyer. But it's amazing to me how many agents go out there and they're like doing an open house to pick up a client. I go, that is not what you are there for.
The other reason agents do open houses is because they know that the house is slightly overpriced. They can't talk their seller into a price reduction, but the seller wants to see action. Yeah. And if you at least do an open house, you've gotten bodies in the door.
Well, the funny thing is you want to tell the seller, well, you're just doing me a favor by doing that. You're
doing right. That's true. Yeah.
People, but you're doing it for the wrong reason. That's the most comical piece of this. I go, you're doing this for the wrong reason. That is not why we do the open house. One of the things that also infuriates me, and I see this quite a bit too, and there's some people who watch my show probably get annoyed with me on this, but too bad, because you can come on the air and talk with me about this any day of the week. But that stuff about letting another agent from a different brokerage do your open house, you are playing with fire. You are going way past the agency guidelines that you're supposed to be doing, adhering to. There's no way that client can be represented properly with someone else from another brokerage operating inside. That client isn't even aware of what that responsibility is. So that one stings me a lot too. I see that all the time. I'm like, who taught you that? Who's even suggested that was a good idea? Most people who do that, you should realize, anybody that's watching the show, that is an easy TREC complaint. If somebody really wanted to go through the academic side and rat you out, that would be a TREC violation. They could come in and say, hey, look, you didn't tell that seller that this is from another firm. They might have said they're from another firm, but they didn't tell them behind it. They didn't say what their advice is, what their opinions can be, what they can and cannot do. They didn't tell them that. There's no real estate agent, unless the far 2% that really know the rules, that would tell them that. So it is amazing when we go across this conversation. So in the marketing, we're going to talk to them about doing these open houses. We're going to talk to them about all the online tools that we have.
Right.
We're going to talk to them about all how, a lot of the general public doesn't realize that when we enter into the MLS is what feeds all the commercial sites that you see. Things like Zillow, Redfin,
Realtor.com.
Yeah, there's hundreds of them that are out there. They're all fueled via the entrance into the MLS. So there's a vast amount of marketing. Yes, one of the main ways we are able to get your house sold these days is via the fact that everybody from here to Shanghai can view your house when it hits the market. One of the things that's changed a lot over the years is where a seller will start leaning on you, saying you're not doing the marketing that you need to. We live in a different world. We don't put the Statue of Liberty costume on. We don't do that anymore. Okay, yeah. We don't need to. Every single person in the world who wants your house has seen it.
Yeah,
they've seen it. They've gone through it. If they're not coming in, I'm going to tell you, and I tell this all the time, there are two reasons people do not buy your house. One is there's something weird about it.
Yep.
Something strange. It has some weird color in it. It backs up to something they don't like. That's one way. But the other way, and it's the most popular, and it's 98% of the time, the house is priced too high.
That's right.
The major job of a real estate agent, it's not so much in the marketing of the property. We have so many things that do that for itself these days. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that the expertise that we looked at that said these houses have sold at this amount. Yours doesn't have this or does have this. It should be priced here. We think people are going to come in here. We think they might start here, but we can get in the middle. That, in essence, is what we are paid for. And the follow-up, the communication telling the seller what it is that we're seeing. This stuff about, I am the biggest opinion that no agent should ever be fired unless it's for being unresponsive.
Right.
Who's unresponsive or who doesn't communicate, that is someone who deserves to be fired. Someone who doesn't keep up with their client every week, that person.
I consider that part of my marketing as well, not only to communicate with my own client, my seller, but to be available to other agents and people who drive by and see the house.
Yeah.
If I pick up the phone and answer questions and get information to them, then then the whole buy process becomes much easier.
Well, plus it lets you give an accountability to them that they're accountable. You're doing what you said you were going to do.
Right.
That's what makes a good real estate agent. When they start hammering us for this house isn't being marketed, and I have to say, we do have a major advantage. That's an easy response. And this is another reason why I moved back into a national brand name. When someone starts telling you, especially for us, that you're not marketing it properly, I'm like, go easy on that. We're the largest broker in the world. We have every bit of tools. There is no one that has the amount of marketing tools and power that we do. There's over 187,000 agents. We have most of the market share. Don't sit there and tell me that the house isn't being marketed properly. It's not going to be marketed better anywhere else. That's a fact too. That's not an opinion. Most tools out there.
That's exactly right. And like Deb was talking about, the communication, the technology, it's almost a double-edged sword because there's so much available to us. We can customize it. We can brand it, to ourselves, to Keller Williams. But at the end of the day, if they can't get a hold of you,
amen.
It's a moot point. So you think that would be a given, right? That an agent, you could get a hold.
It's funny you said that. You would think it's a given, but it just shows you how bad the average agent is because it's not a given. A lot of them are lazy. A lot of people don't know what to say. They don't want to discuss it with them. It's ridiculous.
Well, we all have been in the business long enough to run into where we have a buyer who's looking at a property online and we can't either get access because it's not through the showing service. And so we have to talk to the agent. I have a very memorable one. I've been working with people for a while. We had looked and looked. A perfect house came on the market. And so we're trying to get in. We're trying to make an offer, all these things. And the agent had gone camping to a place where they had no cell service.
Which, if I'm being non-hypocritical, I've had agents pull that stunt too. And when they get back, I'm like, why would you have not assigned someone to that listing? That makes you think you can just
Right.
go off.
In that case, I ended up calling their broker. I just climbed right because my clients, they ended up buying that house, but it was a multiple offer situation. We had to get in there.
Yeah, it's amazing the lack of
Well, and we're
out there.
You know, and we're all human, right? We all make mistakes. But another thing that frustrates me is, you know, I think of MLS as the, you know, as the major. That's your cockpit, right?
Right.
So if you put, you know, what's it garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
If you don't put the right information in there, whatever you put in there, when you hit send, when you list that property, well, the incorrect information is going to go out just as quickly as the right information. And it just amazes me when I look at some of the property descriptions and some of the basic things that they leave out. And I'm trying to get a hold of an agent just to find out.
We're going to do the actual listing appointment where we talk about going through and inputting and why that can be a real problem. In fact, I need to jot that down, listing input, because that's a show we really haven't focused on. And there's a lot of stuff that goes in that. So I want to, as we're talking about marketing right now, you guys have hit the high points. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about one of the things that Keller Williams does very well. And when you talk about marketing tools, because they're very powerful. Keller is one of the only companies out there that can't offer to purchase your house. And we're very transparent. It's not an offer that you would enjoy, but it's there. I mean, in case of times that get rough, as in, i.e. now, that's the thing that we offer. The other thing that we do very well is we have an internal mortgage company that can offer closing cost assistance. Every company has individual marketing ploys, but I will tell you those two things that are offered at Keller Williams are very powerful. So for us and a marketing perspective, as we get out there and we're pushing all these tools, we do have every single thing and then some, as far as when we're talking to our clients. So I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that when we're talking about what are we going to do to sell your house. That's one of the main ones for us is we say, hey, look, if you guys need help, I mean, we'll be able to advertise special financing on this house. And when you have two of the same houses being marketed right next to each other, it's very hard for them to go with somebody else when we can offer that. So that is a superior tool in the real estate war chest that we have. All right, let's go in and let's see, we got about 15 minutes or so. Let's go in and let's talk a little bit about the expectation setting, because I love this conversation, not so much for real estate, but for business in general. I mean, most people know me, my former life was in finance and accounting. This is a principle that holds the same for everything. It affects your business. It affects your life. I am of the highest opinion that when you set an expectation, and even if you have to be negative and pessimistic about it, things can only get better if you told them what the worst that could happen. And I historically have done that on my listing appointments.
Yeah.
I've told them the bad parts. I've told them what can happen. I've told them that it's possible that this house might be on the market for 2 or 3 months. I've told them that it's possible that a lot of people are not going to like the paint that they've chose in there. I give them the worst case scenario. I tell them that we can go under contract and on day 25, someone can back out for some stupid reason. I am letting them know everything that can happen, because if I've set that expectation and that actually does happen, it's much easier for me to go, I told you that's a possibility, versus me going, hey, what the hell? How did this happen?
It's kind of like watching those commercials on TV for whatever new pharmaceutical drug is out there.
Right.
And lists some of the side effects. You know that not everybody's going to have those side effects, but it's the same kind of thing. We're always sitting there watching those commercials going, I don't think the real thing would have to be really bad for me to take that one.
That's really good. I love it when you read through there and they go, side effects include diarrhea, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I don't need any of that. I go, I just need to say stay sick. That's hard to say. Before I do that. So that's funny. That's a good way to put it.
I have two philosophies when it comes to like setting expectations. I want to handle an obstacle before it comes up. So if I know something's usually a problem, I'm going to address it early.
Yeah.
And then I've totally forgotten what I was going to say after that. Yeah.
Talk about the things that you tell people, that you're telling them what you're talking about, negative experiences that could happen.
Well,
there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
I tell people all the time, I am always going to kind of treat them as if they don't know a whole lot about real estate. If they've done 10 personal transactions, they're going to know more than the average person.
Sure.
But most people only do this maybe once every 7 or 8 years.
It's rare to find someone in the general public who
Right. So, but I do this every day. So, I'm one of the first things I'm going to tell them is I won't be showing your house every time it's shown.
Right.
There wouldn't be enough days, and I couldn't do.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So
but
we're talking about this.
We're going to use a showing service so that I know who's been in your house. I know who to count, to yell at if they leave doors open or what have you. And so here's how we do this. And that just makes everybody relax a little.
That is good, setting that expectation, because that is a foolish thing that some people say, well, I thought you were going to show it. I'm like, why would you have thought that? Well, maybe because I didn't set the expectation. Maybe I should have them.
Right.
This is how the house is going to be shown. That's exactly what we're talking about right now. This is how the house is going to be shown. This is what we need to do. This
right. And that's all. And that should all be in the listing presentation. There should be no surprises.
That's right.
When you leave.
Surprises. That's great. Yeah.
Step by step. What's the contract going to be? What's going to happen during the option period? What we should be, you talk about expectations, and we talk about this a lot in during the inspection show that we do. We do that several times throughout the year. Very important to set expectations with the seller that when that repair amendment comes back, this is what we think they're probably going to ask for. And we tell them that we're going to make it very clear that we are only going to be looking at things that are material to the living of this house. We are not talking about doorknobs being loose, paint that's being done. I'm not listening to anything. That's a good tip for anybody that's out there. You want to be viewed as an effective, competent real estate agent in the rest of the real estate world. You don't ask for stuff like that. You ask for things like the air condition doesn't work, which is important in the state of Texas. You ask that the master shower is not working because you're supposed to be taking a shower. You ask if the stove top isn't working because you need to be able to cook. Those are things that we ask for. We don't ask for things like, well, the carpet was pulling up. That is an etiquette that's out there that a lot of agents really go off the deep end on. And sometimes they'll say, well, my client asked for that. I'm like, you should have educated your client then. Right. You should have set the expectation.
Well, and you got to set the expectation with sellers. When you're working with buyers, you've got to set expectations there. It's our job to help them understand the pitfalls of the process.
We have to tell them, if they ask for that air condition, you better damn well be prepared to fix it.
Right.
Well, and that's an excellent point. When I talk to people who are considering, doing a FSBO, for sale by owner, I'll ask them questions. I'll throw questions out there like that. Do you know how to answer this? What would you do in this particular situation? There are so many things that we know, partly like Deb said, from experience, but our training, and the training is ongoing.
Yeah, that's what we're
all the time. And I'm not a magician, but I know what to do to help sell your house. Okay.
I tell my clients if they're buyers and they're working in one of those price ranges where you always have multiple offers, no matter what house it is, I tell them if they do what I tell them to do to make the offer, they will be called homeowners.
Yeah.
And the same thing with sellers. If you do what I tell you, you will not be homeowners.
If they are gambling people, their odds are very good that this will work. If they're gambling people, their odds are very good that this works if you do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
That's a good way to relate to them. So that's a really good small section about expectations. There are a lot of other things we can talk about, what we tell them, but the bottom line is we're preparing them for what is going to happen step by step through the process. So just like these guys said, that there are no surprises. We told them, there is never a client that comes back to me going, I had no idea. I'm like, oh yeah, you did. I go, this is not new. This is not anything new. Like, I love the appraisal. Well, I had no idea. I'm like, yeah, you did. We talked about that there is a potential that this does not exist if that appraisal doesn't come through. I even told you what the steps are going to be. Right. Agents fall back on stuff like that.
We sell a house.
Take the crap from the person yelling at them.
Right. Yeah. We sell a house 3 times. We sell it so that the buyer wants to come in, or actually, let me back up. We sell it so that agents are interested in bringing buyers.
Right.
Then we sell it to the buyer because they come in and they actually make an offer. The last person we have to sell it to is that appraiser,
Yeah.
making sure they understand all the value that we know about.
Well, and and again, like you said, it's all, when I do a listing presentation, when I leave there, I leave them a handout. I mean, not just a handout, but a packet that I put together, a customized packet for that client. And oftentimes I'll even include, the PowerPoint maybe in a packet or certain parts of it to leave them to read over. Call me, later if you have any questions. Well, it's the same thing with the appraisal. I'm going to do my comps. I'm going to put a packet together. I'm going to leave it there for the appraiser when he or she comes, and so that I can spell out what has been done to that house, over the last, year or so, to give them more information, because it's just the more information they have, the better they are able to appraise it appropriately.
Absolutely.
Even though they're going to be looking at some of the same data, they may not know what my client has provided me.
Right.
Y'all did a really good job of doing the expectations. I'm going to cut the show just a few minutes short because I've got some things I need to do for Dina and the kids. Obviously, lives have changed when we're inside with the virus and things, but you guys did a very good job. That's an awesome explanation. And as always, we still didn't get as far as I want to, but those are one show after the other. That's a really good explanation about the expectation and marketing side of this. I think anybody who's watching would have picked up a few important tips there that were important to reinforce when they're going out there. We will probably have another listing show in another 3 or 4 weeks where we will actually address the finance side. We'll talk about the net sheet. I think that part is really important as to addressing how, first of all, how you do the net sheet, because it's a lot easier than you think, and how we explain to the seller what's going on. Because believe me, the two worst things we're about to tell that seller is the house isn't worth what they thought,
and it's going to cost.
And they thought to sell it. These are not things that you have to be an expert at being able to communicate that. So I'm going to help you with that here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to have that show on that. Deb, David, thank you as always. Thank everybody. I love the archive watches out there. I really do. I love the fact we're seeing 400 or 500 people watching the show. I hope
that's great info.
Always feel free to suggest topics to us that you'd like us to see. My contact's easy. You can always get in touch with me at smokerbroker@kw.com. That's smokerbroker@kw.com. Feel free to email me if there's a topic that you'd like to discuss, and I'll look into it. Thanks to everybody out there. Hope everybody's doing well. Stay safe. Keep moving forward. We'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.